Now, this story right here affects you because it affects your pocketbook. Specifically, this is from the Heritage Foundation. Now, yes, they're right leaning, but still a valuable story. This is how the UniParty is only a few steps away from gutting the US dollar. Your US dollar, my US dollar, all of our dollars. America's political establishment has less respect for the US dollar than our foreign adversaries, which is obviously not good. They should be looking out for the dollar. Anyways, that was made clear when Tucker Carlson recently interviewed the Russian strongman Vladimir Putin, who clearly articulated how the Uniparty in Washington is destroying America's greatest strategic and economic asset, her currency. Our currency. Last year, led by the chairman and ranking member of the relevant House and Senate committees, a bipartisan and bicameral bill was introduced that would hand another $300 billion to the Ukraine, this time in the form of the confiscated US dollars owned by the Russian central bank and the Russian people. There are now renewed calls for this measure as both the budget battle at home and the war in Ukraine drag on. Not during the Vietnam or Korean Wars or at any point during the height of the Cold War did America do this to the Soviet Union. The U.S. statesmen understood then, as our adversaries do now, that the U.S. dollar's currency status is among the most important global assets, both economically and strategically. This steadfast, principled commitment facilitated our post war expansion of influence over global affairs and commerce, directed investment to the U.S., and kept inflation at bay by parking dollars as reserves the world over. Eager to demolish this foundation of our global presence and dam that holds back inflation, the Washington Uniparty is rallying behind the next steps to gut the US dollar. We warned on this site before how Biden's unprecedented freezing of US dollars owned by a foreign central bank has fundamentally jeopardized the currency's hard won reserve status. In fact, it's a main factor now driving dozens of countries away from what they see as dangerous and unpredictable United States countries, now including France and Saudi Arabia. Of course, China is eager to exploit these fears and welcome countries into its rapidly growing BRICS anti dollar bloc. And we're going to get into the scary part later in this article. After the Biden administration spends months scoffing at the mere hint of de dollarization, Janet Yellen dropped the bombshell last year, casually admitting that not only is de dollarization happening, but Americans should expect more. In her world, it's only natural for countries to flee the dollar since the world is big. And see, as an economist, she should be working for us in terms of, thinking that de-dollarization is a natural phenomenon is almost her working in the eyes of who knows, like a global, just whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But we need people fighting for the US when they're working for the US. In fact, countries are not fleeing the dollar because the world is big. They are fleeing because Biden made them question the US dollar by using it as a political football where countries must grovel and obey Washington or risk having their national patrimony frozen. Nations who disagree with Biden on abortion, homosexuality, fossil fuels, etc., also run the risk of seeing their dollar reserves taken away. As if on cue, the Biden administration has threatened sanction against countries with anti sodomy laws such as Uganda. This asset seizure bill would dramatically up the ante if the U.S. is not willing to not just freeze, but actually hand over a nation's entire dollar reserves to another country. It confirms the worst fears of any country questioning whether they can count on the dollar or the US at all. As more nations lose confidence in the dollar, they will sell their dollars. This is the scary part. If enough countries do this, those trillions will come flooding back home to America, essentially 70 years of deficits pouring in almost at once. This tsunami could set off an inflation the likes of which we haven't seen in a century. Imagine the last 3 years of price increase put on steroids, amphetamine, and covered in nicotine patches. At a minimum, it'd be multiple years of double digit inflation like we're used to seeing in third world countries. At worst, it'd be a full blown Weimar Republic replacing wallets with wheelbarrows for carrying around currency. Such an economic catastrophe would, of course, take America off the world stage, not by choice, but by necessity. The Uniparty would have made their virtue signaling gift to Ukraine at the expense of America's very standing as a world power. The naive calls for currency manipulation are a defiling of the dollar's sanctity and an assault on people's property rights. If the Uniparty in Congress and the Biden administration push the issue much further, it will mean a long walk off a short pier into an ocean of misery for the American people. Now, I wouldn't say I'm a cheerleader for the Heritage Foundation at all, but I am a cheerleader for the American people, as I am one of them, and I don't want to see my dollar completely worthless as trillions flood back into the United States. And so this is something we have to watch out for in terms of the UniParty, in terms of foreign strategy, because as soon as trillions of dollars come flooding into the United States, that's going to hurt every single person who relies on US dollars for their livelihood, which is just something to be scared of. So remember, watch out for that uniparty.